to change my mind when I started learning by my own, because I discovered that what I knew from my childhood and my curiosity wasn't sufficient enough to be good. What I thought to be good as an high school artist, is absolutely nothing compared to what professional artists does. And when I discovered that, this was the best thing I could ever understand, because I discovered that you need to overpass this feeling of being just curious and creative will make the deal. You and in this way, meeting meeting my big ego, I became a really hard worker. I now I have to admit that I'm almost a workaholic. I work always. Like, this is really annoying to my wife, because whenever she turns her back, I'm on the PC trying a little stuff or something. But yeah, this is something really important to know, that those kind of skills doesn't come by themselves. You need to work really hard to achieve that.
Welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm delighted to introduce multi-disciplinary concept artist Théo Nard for today's episode. Théo is one of those creatives who has an infectious enthusiasm for their craft that is also imprinted into every piece of artwork they create, whether personal or professional. And we at Learn Squared HQ are always excited when Théo drops new work, even more so when it's his homework from the many Learn Squared courses he's been taking. Yet despite Théo's brilliance, his journey has been far from a smooth one. And in this episode, you'll discover how Théo has been navigating the highs and lows of his artistic journey, from a beginner through to working on dream projects as a pro. In short, this episode is packed with amazing takeaways, insights, and all-round enthusiasm from Théo, so please enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to the Learn Squared podcast, and today's guest we have Théo Nard. How's it going, Théo?
Very good, thank you.
Thanks for joining me.
Oh, this is really a pleasure. As I told you before,
Yes.
This is really a great pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you. Like, this is really a strange position to talk now, as what I did most of the time when I have free times is listening to the podcast and learning from all the teachers that we have on Learn Square. So speaking of me right now is really strange, but I'm really proud of that. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, great to have you on. And if anyone who is not familiar with Théo's work, just check the links in our description right now. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it playing in the background. I'm sure you'd agree that Théo's work is amazing. But just for people who are not aware of yourself, if you'd like to give us a quick introduction of yourself and what you do, that'd be great.
Yes, of course. So, so my name is Théo. I'm a French artist. I'm 24 years old right now, and I tend to say I'm a CG generalist, because I do a lot of different things in my career. I started as a game artist, but now I'm more of a concept artist. I'm doing also a lot of animation, and as I told you, I went before, everything I do is under NDA, so sadly I can't talk about what I do. But yeah, this is really interesting project I have now, and I'll be really excited to speak about that later in the show.
So just to kind of keep it NDA safe, is this a concept art project? Are you fully into working in concept art now, or is it still based on your generalism?
Actually, no, this is what is really interesting is that I've been employed by a studio I can't name, but it's for animation, and those people want to try a lot of things I showed on Instagram. This is like a mini experiment I did on the integration of 3D in 2D pipeline for anime shows. And so I'll be doing a lot of different things from concept art to final production. And this will be the first time my work is going to be the final product. And I'm really afraid to see my work being actually on the screen.
Wow. That sounds really exciting. I totally get you with the, I guess, the fear side of things, because is that more a case of just like you want to make sure that it just comes out great, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.
And it's also fun to see, and I think it's probably something that's going to be more common now, because a lot of guests have touched upon this theme, just like yourself, where either they've started off on one aspect of the creative space and slowly migrated to another, while still keeping those skills that they've gained into these different places. But also that now they're embarking on projects or getting hired for, not for a specific kind of role. It is like a multitude of things. So, but yeah, your Instagram is always popping with awesome stuff as well. So like, where does that come from? Like, is that like you started off with animation, or is that something that was you picked up like in between? Like, what was your beginnings like?
Actually, my relation to art has been a bit strange. Like, this is not something absolutely awesome, but my family is really an art family. Like my mother is doing speech in the museum in France. My father owned a video club. My grandfather was an architect, and my other grandfather wrote plays for theaters.
Wow.
So I've been always in the art sphere, you know. So I always knew I wanted to do art, but it's has gone through many forms. Like, I guess, like most of us, I was really into drawing when I was a kid. But what I think changed the things really heavily for me was when I was, I guess, like something like 14. I touched Blender for the first time, and I was starting to think like, oh, this is incredible. I can do so much thing with this. This is like drawing, but you can move around, you can explore your own world. So I did that as an hobbyist for a long time. I did a really classical scholarship, but I don't know how it is in England. I think this is the same, but in France, good art school are really too much expensive. So right after high school, I tried to make what you call the Beaux-Arts. This is the traditional fine art school. And this was not interesting to me. This is like, you know, some people might disagree with me, but I don't think this is an interesting topic for me to really sell yourself as an artist. But this is really about conceptualizing things, really philosophic. I always wanted to make something more related to entertainment. And so I guess I'm not the first one to say that, but when I saw Star Wars for the first time, in the bonus, I saw there are people behind the films. Those guys, they are designing actually what you see on the screen, and you don't hear about them, but this is the heart of the movie, and this is the first time I thought to me, okay, this is what I want to do. And you can cut me if I'm going too long on the things,
No, you're great.
Thank you. But actually, as I told you, it was too expensive to do an art school. So the things made that I've been doing waiter for a long time, barman, bartender. And after 2 years of making that, I have sufficient amount of money to stop and learn by myself.
Nice.
And this is when I rediscovered concept art, because when I saw Star Wars, you might imagine I was a kid, and this was on the side of my head for a long time. And when I have the opportunity to learn by myself, I discovered like the artists like Ethan Zana, Maciej Kusiera, people like this. And I thought, okay, this is the people that I saw in the DVD, but they do the stuff right now. So how can I do to do this? And yeah, this is at the same time I discovered Learn Square and started to learn really every day. And finally, I ended up finding a job in a VR company in my hometown. And I dropped from this job like a few months ago and started freelancing. So this was a really compressed summary of my career until there. But
wow, that sounds like a very colorful journey. And it's good that it's, I guess, reaping the rewards that perhaps you would have, I guess, would have liked at the beginning of your journey to happen straight away. But I'm sure the answer would be a positive one if you were to say that, like, how everything transpired to where you are now. I guess all those events shaped you to where you are now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, for example, I have a similar pathway to my art career, similar to yourself. It was a case of, like, I can totally relate to you where it was, I want to do this, but I don't know how. I don't know how these people had a job. Then you try and find work and, you know, a pathway to get you there. Either it clicks or it doesn't click. And I was in like a sales job for, you know, like over 10 years, 12, 13 years. Then you get your break and all that kind of stuff. So I totally get, like, I can imagine what it was like in your shoes in terms of, like, I guess the emotions. I'm sure there's frustrations along the way, then excitement when things click, and trying to balance everything else as well, including life. It's also fun to hear, like, you call yourself a CG generalist, and the way you described everyone in your family, I guess you can see where it comes from, because it's like a, you know, almost like a generalist family, like different areas of art and creativity, all influencing. So touching upon that a bit more, like, do you reckon that boosted your love for art even more? Because I'm sure, like, with a lot of artists, whether they have creative people around them or not, there's always that, like, you know, passion to want to create, and there's no way of escaping it or getting rid of it, right? But, like, looking back now, after time has passed, what kind of things, being around other creatives and seeing how it impacted them, like, what things really had an effect on you and maybe changed the way you create up until now?
I think like one of the first time I realized I wanted to make art, and what shaped the way I do art now is it's a far memory. I was a kid, and as I told you, my mother was doing speech in the museum, and I was there's no chance to have anybody to keep me at home, so she brings me with her at the museum, into every museum in my town. And I remember being in the archive of the museum when I was a child, and I had the opportunity to walk and look at all the paintings that they didn't expose at the time, or things like this. And I've been really exposed to multi-discipline really early on, because all around me there was all those stuff, and I was telling me when I was already really young, okay, every one of these people has their sweet spots. They have their own way of doing things, but they ended up in the museum. So this is the first time I told myself, okay, you can have your own personality in art, and this is what shaped the way you work. And so today, you told me earlier, and this was a big compliment for me, that some of my work are original and fresh, and this is something I really want to have in my work. This is to put everything I'm interested in, because I'm really like cyclic into what I want to learn, what I want to see. I have periods where I'm more interested in animation, where I'm most interested in painting, and this is what shaped my work, I think, because up until recently, this was also a struggle to deal with this personality, because I was saying, oh man, you want to do concept art, but you are wasting your time learning how to move characters and things like this. And so if I have something to an advice for other people, and to answer your question, something that really shaped my work now is that I don't regret anything that I learned all along this path, because even the smallest things have now a great influence on my work. And as I told you, now I'm doing something that I never thought I would do when I was starting learning. So finally, this is so great to see that one things I try when I was on my free time ended up being one of the greatest projects I do until now.
Wow. I mean, that's like a great testimony to just sticking to your guns, right? And also working on what you want to work on, like what feeds your passion. But on the other side of things, and I'm sure we've all been there, and a lot of people do struggle with this, where it's a case of you can work on passions, but then you always, especially with artists, we always look at like our flaws, our deficiencies, where we're lacking, and then sometimes we see maybe it's just some great artist that you look at their work, or like say a kind of company maybe want to get into some of the work they do,
Mhm.
and sometimes I guess we force ourselves to work on maybe it's either a skill set or a like a visual philosophy and all that kind of stuff, um just to make it work. Like, did you ever struggle with that, or did you always kind of like had that conviction of no, I must do it the way I feel comfortable with and what I want to do?
Oh, actually, this is a really good question because I think this is something really important when you're learning to sometimes put your personality aside. To what I mean by that is, for example, if I follow my personality and what I like to do, maybe I would have never studied perspective, for example, because
Mm.
I'm quite lazy in that sense. So obviously, there are some times during my learning process where it's told to me, okay, this guy, for example, I can see this work. Maybe I don't like it so much, but I'm sure this is really efficient in a production pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to listen to what he or she said, and we need to take it into account. So yes, I think following your own tracks is really important, but maybe you have to learn how to put that aside when you face certain problems. Like, for example, when you're used to a certain way of working, I think this is really important to know when your workflow, like the things you like to do, the way you like to do them,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to say, okay, this is not working. So maybe I'm going to take a path that I like less than my own way, but this is going to be really more efficient. And in in the end, this is what shape your style, because your style is actually something that a lot of people think it come from nowhere, like this is
Mm-hmm.
just talent or anything, but it's actually the additions of what you keep from people and what you left from people, like your own personality mixed of everything that you need to go further and further.
Mm. And speaking of style, how would you describe yours? And would you say you even have a style? Or like how would you define a style? Because I guess for some it might just be like an aesthetic. For some it
Mhm.
might be a technique. For others it might just be like, say, okay, no matter what this person does, they could be using pencil, paint, oils, or whatever. I'm gonna see this type of image from them, like in a philosophical sense. Where does that? What are your views on that?
Uh, I think I don't know if you agree with me, but I guess everybody has a style, and no one is capable of saying really what is your own style,
Mm-hmm.
because it comes from the eye of the people watching your piece, watching your artwork. But I think style for an artist is the way you do, and style for the audience that watch your work is the way they see and the way they feel about your work. Like, for example, I know my style is mixed technique. For example, I use a lot of 3D. I tend to look at every tools that is new and I can
Mm-hmm.
help me make my things quicker. But if I ask someone what is my style, they will never say that. Most people say it of my work they come to, but when it comes to style, they say there is a certain mood to my work, and
Mm-hmm.
this is something I absolutely never work on, because when I see my own work, I tend to say, okay, every one of these pieces is looking totally different. I don't
Yeah.
see any coherence between them, but people tend to see. So good for good for people and good for me.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely touches upon like a different aspect of art because even as creatives, you're always viewing other people's art, and like you said, like we appreciate art in our own ways. Obviously, there's a general consensus on things in terms of, say, everyone might think this piece is great and that piece isn't great, or this artist is amazing, that artist is amazing. That's more of like an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, say, like like you mentioned Star Wars earlier, Star Wars, it's no secret on this podcast. I'll talk about it a fair bit. I'm not only a fan of it; it's like yourself. It's probably one of the main influences of why I'm doing what I'm doing today in a creative
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like, I can only imagine what my art would be like, or at least my desire for art, if that had never existed. But then looking upon Star Wars, for example,
Mm-hmm.
people do take that differently. Like some people, I guess a lot of creatives do love it because visually it's still badass to this day, because it had
Mm-hmm.
great designers, great artists creating these things, this world, this universe from scratch, and
Mm-hmm.
it still holds to this day. Um, but then you got people who maybe not creative still appreciate the escapism of Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. But then on the same side, you've got like the creator, and I'm sure you've probably heard the stories of how George Lucas had a terrible experience making Star
Yeah,
Wars.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
this thing that so many love, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, like a labor of love when he made it. It was a lot of, by the sounds of it, a lot of torture, a lot of doubt, a lot of negativity surrounding it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you nailed it in terms of that. On one hand, you can look at a piece of art and a creator's art, yet what you take away from it is not the same thing that the creator had putting into it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right. And but at the same time, Star Wars is a good example when you watch behind the scenes, uh, because as you said, the audience has a totally different feeling compared to the artist making the piece. But when you see behind the scene, mainly when you listen to Doug Cheng, uh,
Mm-hmm.
you understand how important it is to prepare the relationship the audience will have with your media. Because if we all create without thinking about how people are going to feel
Mm.
about it, this will be nonsense. And when you listen to George Lucas directing the teams, and as I said, mainly Doug Cheng, because his work is absolutely insane and so
Legend.
professional, I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, absolute legend. This is so interesting to see this quote like, okay, he said, like, Doug, this is cool, the ship that you make, but I don't get exactly what it is. And if I don't get it, the audience will not get it
Mm-hmm.
either. So I think it's important to remind us that we are working for us, but we are working for an audience, and the relationship between that is really the biggest part of our work,
Oh,
in a way.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Totally agree with you on that. And it's pretty cool that you mentioned that as well, because um also, like as you mentioned before, when we, a lot of us as kids, we just picked up pencils and paper or whatever and just created, and we did it for ourselves. And the audience, we never thought of an audience, because a lot of the time with kids, you just draw and then discard the paper and then go on to the next piece of paper. You never cherish that creation, right? Unless maybe when we got older and started to get better at art and everything. But then at the same time, when you're working, let's say, for clients, and when you're getting hired as a professional, then it completely changes, where it's not just about what we want to do, it's about our skills to get what our client wants, for example.
Mhm. Yeah.
But then now, in the realm that it is now,
Mhm.
we do have professional realm, but then also us as artists, we all are, like starting to nurture our own audiences. Like some artists are just, have got like millions of followers just from their art. So in that sense, that's the same kind of thing, I guess, right? Like when you start creating, whereas before, maybe you get a following or work starts getting popular because of how you create just for yourself. But
Mhm.
then perhaps when you do get an audience, I wonder if like a lot of artists start changing the way they create for the
Mhm.
audience. Um, and like for yourself, is that something that plays on your mind when you're working on personal work? And how different is your approach to personal work compared to professional work?
Um, Actually, I think that the way this relationship has an impact on my work is that we are really influenced by social networks right now. And just speaking of personal work that I post on social network, I'm sometimes afraid to change my way of working because there is not that much people following me for now, but sufficiently so I feel that I need to respect them. And sometimes I feel like, okay, to those people like this way I'm working, and if I change it, if the result is not the same, maybe they'll not like it. And this has some impact also on professional work, because for most of my career now, people contacted me because of the social network and contact me via the social network. And this is the same for those clients where I'm telling me like, okay, for this project, I think there is some kind of techniques that I want to use to make the thing go faster and maybe do more interesting results. But at the same time, I'm saying, okay, but this client told me he liked my work and this is why he employed me. So how am I supposed to keep this style and do the best I can to be efficient? And this is really a strange feeling that I get more and more when I'm working with clients. I don't know. Maybe you felt the same at a certain point. This is that the more I'm progressing in my art and the more I'm getting interesting clients offer, I'm feeling sometimes that I'm losing this childish way of doing things that is rather important. I don't know. Maybe did you also felt that at what time that you need to rework on your childish mind and find this way of creating somewhat naively?
Yes, 100%. I get that almost constantly. Um, but then I also, when I'm working on my stuff, because sometimes my stuff's maybe a bit peculiar, then I start thinking maybe I'm not going to get a vast array, maybe I'm not attracting a vast array of clients than I could be if I, change it up a little bit. So, like,
Mhm,
as opposed to start working on personal work, do more, I guess, stuff that is more industry friendly. That makes
mhm,
sense. But then, like when you do get on like a job and stuff, then you almost immediately start thinking of I want to go work on personal stuff because I want to do that, that creative thing. So, and I'm listening to like say other artists who have had to deal with this, who spoke about it a lot more, I guess, better than I have. It seems to be like a common thing, like amongst many artists. I'm sure there's some that are just happy to be on a job and crush it, and then they can just continue their day. Um, but yeah, it's a quite a tough one because for me, when that happens, I just remind myself that to ignore that, because when you're on a job, like to focus on the job and all that kind of, it's just a distraction that's taking you away from
mhm.
your best work, right? And
Yeah.
then, like when that does happen, I always tell myself that this is a finite thing. Like, um, unfortunately, not many freelance contracts are forever. It's always for a limited time. So
Mhm,
you can always like convince yourself that, okay, when that's done, then you can go back to what you're doing. But then sometimes you get burnt out and you don't go back to what you're doing because, you know, you, you just get like fried from all that kind of stuff. But like, is that something that has, I guess, not so much bothered you, but is that something that's playing on your mind a fair bit, or is it just something that's like you're aware of, but you're gonna see how it plays out?
Yeah, this was not the biggest thing that influenced my work day, but it has a great impact on the way I create at some point, because how I can tell that, I was doing things in a certain way, and I was feeling, okay, the results are somewhat good, but I don't enjoy what I do.
Hmm.
And I think this is the moment that my work became, if people think that this is great, a little bit more original and personal, because I felt that I was sufficiently experienced to to start using what I do on my free time and incorporate it in my work. And step after step, I felt that I was more enjoying the work I was doing, because I was stressing a lot to find a way of working that would really be efficient. But efficiency is relative to every client. One big thing is, one time I had a client that told me I need things to be done really quickly. So I was rushing and making things as quick as they could.
Mm-hmm.
And when I give the work to him, he told me, "Wow, you finished? It took you like 1 day." When I said quick, I meant like a month. Something like this. And no, this is something I always ask to my clients, is what they call quickly, because in function of that, I can propose way of working that could be way more enjoyable to me than if I have just 1 day or few hours to do a task. I will rely on things that I like a bit less, but that are really much more efficient, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I've been in similar situations where it's a case of, it had the same conclusion. It was more like naivety on my side, thinking, I just want to, when you get the work in, you just want to do a great job. So whatever's said or whatever's requested, like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll get it done. And then, yeah, all it would have taken was just an initial question to be like, so do you mean this? And then it would have been clarified. And then there's been times where I've like similar to yourself, more focused on getting the work done at a time. Mm-hmm. When if I had asked that question initially, then I would have had more time and focused more on the quality of the work. But I guess that's more like it's something that you learn along the way, right? Because if that's someone who you've worked with for maybe a number of years, or like the back of your hand, then you'd know what they mean when they say do it quickly. But when it's someone like with a lot of clients that we have with freelance, I guess, is initially there's a lot of people that you don't have prior history with. So, like it's a case of learning people, learning what they want. And then obviously different companies have different philosophies and all that kind of stuff. So on that hand, that is quite like interesting as well. Just in that aspect, because that's almost stuff that is never taught, right? Like you hear the advice and you kind of store it in your brain, but you never know when to apply it until it happens, and normally it's too late. So you always learn like by mistake. But like, what are your like tips and stuff? So that's like one great tip you've mentioned is a case of just little things, get it clarified, because those little things can lead to like in your case, was it a day versus what could have been like a month, for example, which when it comes to like art, that's like a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, are there any other things that you've picked up along the way that you think, okay, if I had done that initially, that would have made a massive change?
I think one big thing is it's a bit ego related. It is that when I first started doing art professionally, I discovered that people I'm supposed to work with or work for them, they don't have all the time the same relation to art that you have. Some of them are just marketing people, for example. And in the beginning, this was so frustrating to me to talk to this type of people, because I told myself when I was a student, yeah, one day I will work on big production and people will understand what I want to say, and this will be really fast, and everybody will be there will be a teamwork. This is absolutely awesome and no obstacle along the way. This was absolutely naive, But as a tips, this is that learning to talk about art with people that doesn't understand art as you do as an artist is really important, because just like teaching, for example, this is learning to to express yourself as a non-artist people. And I don't know if I'm clear with this, but this is related to what we told earlier, like learning to talk to those kind of people, learn to make art to audience, because when you need to present a piece of work to someone, that's like the typical example that we get in a lot of artist interview is that sometimes you work with an art director that can understand the quickest and dirtiest sketch you can do, and other times it's like something that someone that will needs an almost finished piece to understand the concept. And learning to speak to those different people and not be angry about it. Maybe I'm the only one who was absolutely mad at it, but I was really angry when I started, because I thought no one understand what I wanted to do. And as a student, sometimes people that has a big ego like me in the beginning, you think I have the good idea, and people just don't understand that I have the good idea. But the best advice is that the greatest idea is, once again, the idea the audience will get the most. And to find this idea, you have to work hand in hand with people that have nothing to do with that never learned what you learned in your art school, but they know things that will serve you along the way, if you understand what I mean with this.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah, you're totally right with that. It is something that, like, it's, it is a common thing, and when you're hired by a company to make art, it is a common thing to think that initially when you're starting out that I'm getting hired for this, so the shorthand's going to be the same. They're going to get the process and all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, on one hand, it is easy to be frustrated. It's natural to be frustrated, because when you're trying to do a job and you hear these little, I guess, maybe it's a feedback or just things that are on the same wavelength, it does throw you off your process, because you give everything into something, and then when something's miscommunicated, or perhaps the wires were crossed, it does throw you off a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
But then at the same time, like, one thing that, again, something I have to constantly remind myself, because although how you explained it is perfect, because the way to look at it is that, oh, okay, so if this person is not getting it, or I'm not able to communicate it, especially if you're hired, it's most likely for an IP of some kind, which is going to be to a wider audience as opposed to just a few people. And 99% of the audience is going to be like this person who, won't understand, like brush economy and all that kind of stuff, all these little things that we obsess over. Composition, even, like, a lot of times awesome things that artists, is like composition, mastering it is almost like, we're getting a black belt in something. But for a general audience member, it's not a factor that they want to appreciate. But then, like, say like you hire a builder or like a chef or something. We don't know the steps that they go through to make their meal. We just want it to taste great, and we know when it tastes great. And we but we don't necessarily know, like, the ingredients or the tools, all that kind of stuff, the effort, the training required behind it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good metaphor of this, I think, the cooking.
Exactly.
But, like, if you are talking about this, like, to keep on this track, I think, like, a thing, like, if you want to, sometimes people want to know when they start becoming a good professional, if that makes sense. And I think one of the ways you could know if you're getting better in terms of concept art, mostly, for example, is the first time that you will have feedback from your client that will be not that good, and you have the opportunity to redo all what you have been working on for like a day, for example, without being anything but happy to help the team, and know that it's not an important thing that you have worked like that much of time for almost nothing, because what you call nothing is actually a step further in the production and a step further to making something that will be really appreciated. And when you feel that you don't have this ego telling you, oh, fuck this, this art director throwing my art away.
Yeah.
This is like, at least for me, the first time that I had this really calm reaction to feedback and told myself, okay, I understand what my art director wants. I think I could do things like this. And just look him in the eye and say, okay, I see what you want. No, there will be no, no more work thrown away. I'm feeling what you want to do, and we could go further together. This was really something important to me, because, as I told you at the beginning, this was really frustrating because I was creating, as we said before, as a child, like just putting ideas on paper and learning to that you are part of a team and part of a project. This is one of the biggest things you need to learn as a concept artist, for example, or any art oriented oriented to entertainment in a way.
For sure. Well said. Yeah. You mentioned two words. And I guess there's two common things. Frustration and ego. When you were having that experience and you were feeling that frustration, like, how did you get through that? Because I'm sure you'd agree, and we've all had these instances in life, whether it's art related or just general circumstances. Sometimes frustration can get the better of you and almost make you either make poorer choices or like think not with a clear head. So like, was that something that you had to remind yourself to be like, okay, how am I going to get past this? Or did you kind of like naturally just get through that to get where you're at now in terms of like, like just handling like clients and all that kind of stuff?
Actually, it was a mix of both. It was both natural things and work on myself. But this can be different for a lot of people. But I'm working on myself really internally in a way that I need to find explicit ways of doing things to go further. And for example, a good way I found to overpass the frustration was that, okay, personal projects, this is a thing, and client work is another thing. And when I'm working on client work, I don't do really artwork. I'm thinking of making like something like a puzzle, I'm telling myself, you have to make the most piece that could work together. And this is almost, it became almost like a game with my clients and directors. Like, I'm not frustrated if they don't like some pieces I do. I'm concentrating of what they like, and this is really a game. Like, okay, they like this piece, so what can I extract from this that they like to build upon? And this is really entertaining. Like, this is not frustrating anymore, because I listened one time to the great Craig Mullins, and he said that to become a better artist, you have to be able to take one art piece that you have done and just delete it, thrown away, and be absolutely not concerned about it. Because to be a good artist, you have to know that if you have done one time, you can do it another time.
Yes.
Exactly the same. And this is something really important to me. And this is another time an advice that I can give. This is not to be too precious about what you're doing, because I told that already a lot of time during this podcast. But what we do, I talking about professional things.
Yeah.
This is really to build upon big projects, and this is not that much important what you create individually. And seeing these things like a game where you have to find the track of what people want, this is really more interesting than being focused on what you produce and be really careful about it.
Yeah.
And more than this, if you are in this mood, like being really precious about what you do, this is the best way to be fired or not having good relation with the other teammates or with the clients, because you are too precious, too much ego, but more than that, you are not efficient, because a lot of concept artists at least already say that things that you see on social network are not what we produce in production pipeline. And this is for a good reason, is that once again, this sketch is not meant to be the most beautiful piece you have done, and you have not to be proud. You have to be proud of the result you achieve with the whole team.
Yeah, man. That's very well put again. And I love that way of looking at it. About treating it like as a puzzle or like a game. Because that is a great way of seeing a problem or just something that's becoming like an issue in terms of trying to complete your task, and then turning it on its head to make it something that you can actually like conquer and then get past.
Yeah.
And you again, like touching upon ego again. We've all got one. I always say that like my ego died many years ago, but there's always some little pieces, left behind.
Yeah.
But I would say, reluctantly would say that it's something that I can not worry about too much. Only like I said, because it got destroyed many years ago. But in terms of ego, it's like I always do think about sometimes that maybe it is good to have an ego. Like there's always a time where it can perhaps be an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage.
Yeah.
But like, is ego, because you mentioned that before a few times as well, is that something that has been a problem for you, or is it something that is just part of who you are? And when did you become aware of the ego side of yourself? Because for a lot of people, they might not be aware of their actions and how that can probably just stem from what we call ego. Yeah, like, I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, sure. Actually, ego, at least having a big ego, this is something that happens really a lot. Like you said, more when you are younger, and by the time it fades a bit away. But having a big ego is a blessing, a curse, because like it can be really hard. Like I said, this can cause frustration along the way. But if you like know how to, this is dumb, but activate your ego, this is really the best weapon that you have to progress. Because maybe once again, it's not for every type of people, but for me, I know that frustration is some things that can make me really better, because it's not like I'm easily frustrated by things that people say to me, but I'm more like ambitious in a way. And my ego, if there is multiple sorts of ego, is like when I see the work of people and I say, wow, this guy is so much better than me, I'm really hungry. and and I said, okay, so now whatever I'm doing right now, I'm going to look at what makes these things better, and I will have no sleep until I know what this guy is doing better than me. And this way of working, at least for me, not for everyone, is something that is really motivating. And I don't want to say that for anyone who is listening, I'm not looking at your work and being mad at you and saying, "Who the fuck is this?" But yeah, in a way, managing your ego is knowing how to use it and when to put it aside, because this is still an important thing. And I know, for example, because I watched a lot of Learn Square related things. I learned Mathieu, for example, as at the beginning, he talked a lot about his ego. He was saying that, for example, he was locking his PC so nobody is watching at his techniques. And at the beginning, I was really inspired by that. I was thinking, yeah, I understand what he means. I need to do a little bit things like this. And he evolved in some way, and I did too. Because, for example, ego can push you to do things like this, like, for example, being really precious about the way you do things. And this is something you're hearing more and more through social network and different kind of artists. Sharing is really important, and sharing needs you to put your ego aside, because like if nobody shares anything, if everybody is precious about what they do, no one will learn. And we are all parts at each one has a different level, but we are all links in the chain. And you not sharing, being too precious about the way you're doing is not a good thing. And that's some things I learned quite recently when I started sharing a bit of my process.
Yeah.
And this is also, I think, really ego related. Like you think, if I share certain things, like those people that are maybe better than me, they're going to use those techniques and they are going further than me. But in fact, this is where personality meets ego in a way, because like you can develop techniques alone in your room, but your personality defines how good you're going to use it. It's not because you're sharing something that someone is going to do the same thing with it. So I think this is once again a good place to put your ego aside. It's the time of sharing stuff. For example, I don't know what you think about this.
No, yeah, totally agree. And another thing that is another layer to this as well is, and maybe they're all the same thing, is that when it does come to things like, not sharing or not revealing, or like you mentioned, is if I reveal something, then someone's going to take it and do it better, and perhaps, you lose opportunities or whatever, is the insecurity of artists. And it's almost like, to be an artist, great or otherwise, I guess you kind of need a bit of everything, like that insecurity, that ego, that just passion to want to just continue with it. And providing you keep that all in a good balance, then things will progress. And then, if one element does get a bit too out of hand, then things start falling apart. And like for yourself, for your journey, did it ever, like, have you ever had those moments, not to put a down on things, but did you ever have those moments where things did start to fall apart, or maybe things started to get a bit overwhelming?
Yeah, a good example was like when I at the when I was in the first studio that employed me. It was a VR company, as I said, in my hometown, and I started to. I was an intern at the beginning, and along the way, I became the lead 3D artist in this studio, and things started falling apart when I learned the first time how to express ideas and feeling the need to be listened by people, by teammates. This is also a big ego-related things, to learn how to explain how you think is the best way to do stuff, while not frustrating other people. This is, I think, what needs an important thing. And this is a good example of where it falls apart, because this is also related to sharing, because I don't want to mention anybody, or I don't want to make me look as someone terrible or really critical. But at one point, when I become the lead 3D artist, they needed to replace my job by another people, whereas I was occupying. And they employed an intern, and I thought, like, this is never going to work. Like, this is the work is bad. I don't know how this guy could be in there. But I really regret this aspect, because at the beginning I was really mad at it, and so this caused some trouble, because my work was suffering also from this, because I had to take responsibility for this guy and others. So I was like, oh, my work is getting worse, and I need to tell everything to these people. But at one point, where things was really getting worse and worse, because I was constantly mad, and my teammates was feeling it. This was making nothing good for the team, and I make the decision to be in the state of, okay, no matter if I have to be seen as the one who doesn't does the best work anymore.
Mhm.
No, I'm the lead. So my role is to, once again, put my ego aside and do my best in a way that the whole team can do the best work. And this is the first time I learned how to share. I was never concerned anymore about being precious about the way I do stuff. I started explaining to these people, and this was the best choice I ever made, because like some weeks after that, this guy became really decent at what he does.
Mhm.
I didn't need to explain him things all along the way anymore, so my work became to be good, sufficiently good again.
Mhm.
And I proved the team that I could help them if they had problem, and this was the best choice I could make in a way. But yeah, this has been a really hard time because like as I said, the ego take place, and you are in the position of your boss that is telling you that I think you can handle things more than other, and you want to show people that you deserve this place, and so you're making everything to be listened by the others, and this is the moment, in fact, where you need to calm down and start sharing and everything. Is that something that you think interesting answer to this question?
No, for sure. I mean, like, I think it's quite insightful at the fact that it's, like that you came to that conclusion. Like, basically, it could have gone the other way, where you could have stuck to your guns. You could have been, like adamant with your point of view, and like not basically doing right for the team or the project. But it just showed that the fact that ultimately, when it did come to, let's say, the crossroads or a choice, your choice was to, okay, what other steps do I need to take to make sure that this helps the overall goal, right?
Yeah.
And that's encouraging to see, because for me personally, and I've worked in teams for many times. Not so much in art. I've never actually worked in an art studio, but just throughout working career and working life and all that kind of stuff. I've worked with a bunch of people, bunch of teams. The stories you've mentioned, about that experience, I've seen it like many times, and like in much more extreme circumstances. And it's a shame where there were so many instances where the overall goal was never on topic, and it was just like distractions or little things that completely took away from the work. But like you just showed that in those times when you got to be like, okay, what is the right thing to do here, or at least let's get the job done, and then maybe any grievances or that kind of stuff can be taken care of afterwards. And I guess that's probably a lot of the things that that's something you kind of have to learn. Maybe, I mean, we all have like our personal traits where some people are maybe more confrontational than others, and all these kind of things, right? There's a lot of different types of people, and when we put them all in one room, sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes there's unforeseen problems that you never thought would have happened. But then, like you showed, that is something that you either have to come to the conclusion of, or learn that, oh, hold on, this is something that's detracting from what we need to do. Let's find a way around it. And then that's when you learn, like how to be diplomatic, or maneuver these kind of things.
And in fact,
yes.
Sorry.
No,
In
no,
fact, this is a lot of people tend to think, like, if we do a sports comparisons, a lot of people think that art is at least professional art is an individual sport, but it's actually a collective sport, and it's going to be more like this in the future, because tools are evolving in a certain way that your personal influence on the project is more and less important. In fact, the more the tools evolve, the more the tool is responsible for the results, and the more the teamwork is important in these fields. By time, in previously, like for example, if you take someone like Sid Meads on Blade Runner, the work that he puts to make the vision, to achieve the vision of of Ridley Scott, he was almost like the only person who is really responsible for it. But as things evolve, we are more and more to work on things. And as I said, the tools make the thing that like the way you're communicating with the other people in your team is the thing that really impacts the final product. Like I didn't go through any production where an individual shot was that much impactful in the end.
Yeah. And I think using the team example is a sport example is like a great metaphor as well. I mean, before the podcast, we're speaking about football, and you know, how many times have we seen where if a great player who's maybe good at scoring goals doesn't track back and defend in the last minute and they lose a game, you know, it's like that could be the difference between being champions versus another bad season. And although on paper, you know, you could have the best stats and you know you're at least in terms of, you know, talent, you're probably going to be better than most. But a team game where many people are involved, if one person can't do it, then there's no point in, you know, like focusing on the individual aspect.
Yeah, definitely.
And tools, yes, that's a good segue into the topic of like software and stuff, because I mean, like you started using Blender what 10 years ago, so like a decade ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that is a software that's come on huge leaps and bounds. 10 years ago, that's when I finished uni, and at that point in time, we were being taught Maya, and you know, like Blender was almost something that was kind of like laughed at because it was so basic compared to like something like Maya. But look at it today; it's almost like, or fastly becoming the go-to software for 3D. And another interesting thing as well is in that regard, I remember when we were being taught 3D, we were told that these softwares you're learning are the ones that are quote unquote industry standard. So you know, like you tend to specialize in a particular software because, you know, hey, if I want to get a job, I need to learn the software because they're going to expect me to do work in the software. Same maybe for like people who use Cinema 4D or Houdini because of their specific things that those softwares can do that many others can't. You specialize in it. Whereas now, you know, it's almost the lines are becoming blurred, if not they're blurred already. Like, how have you been with software over the years? Is that so? Has it frustrated you? Has it always excited you? And where do you think it is going with software? Yeah, I know you just mentioned it just a second ago about how it's affecting projects now. But yeah, I'd love to hear more on that from you.
We can start by talking a bit about Blender because, as I told you, I've been using Blender for 10 years. And as you said, like at the beginning, people was really hard with Blender.
They're very cool to it.
Well, very cool, yeah. And they was laughing at me. And I'm really happy to say that no, who's laughing now?
Exactly.
This is free and this is becoming more and more standard. But yeah, joke apart, being really precious also with your software is absolutely not a good idea because the software always evolve, and even when tools become really interesting, like Blender, for example, at the moment it can be still somewhat hard to explain to a production studio that they need to change their way of working because there is a lot of things that people not realize when they are not professional. Is like, for example, studios might have like 10 years of pre-written scripts of developers that made add-ons and shortcuts for Maya, for example, and they are not ready to make the step to change software. But especially when you are freelance, you can always come with new solutions for a studio, and as you know your software, you know how to present them, this can be accepted. But as you said, I'm not the best example for this because I never really touched any other actual 3D software than Blender. because this is really versatile and this allows me to do pretty much everything that I need. But everything outside of this, like engine, there is a lot of things you can get from different software. And one important thing to say is that, as you said before, a time ago, people was telling you that you have to learn industry standards and you have to specialize. But the truth is, when you start learning one software, the language is almost the same for everything. Not to mention ZBrush, because this is not this is not the same, all right? But I realized that when I wasn't using Unreal before. I started using it when I jumped into the VR field, and when I first looked at Unreal, I didn't open it at all. But I realized, okay, in the end, I never touched this software, but I understand what the tutorial is telling me. And this is a big thing. Like, people working on the software are doing their best to make the things clear for everybody. So you don't have to be scared by changing software, because once you master one, it's, I think, in my opinion, really easy to change things when you know the basic. It's like when you have fundamentals in art, there is no problem if you are previously drawing only with acrylics and then you're switching to oils. Yes, obviously there is some differences, but you have the fundamentals, so there is no problem switching your software or switching your tools. So I'm not the first one to say this, I know, but fundamentals is the only things that you need to be specialized in, if I can say things like this, because it allows you to work on multiple things, and you can be sure that Blender is now the software of choice, but in 3 or 4 or 10 years, it will be another software.
Yes.
And if you're too much specialized in one thing, you will have to run so fast to keep track of the other people that will be enough experience in the general art, I would say, in fundamentals, and that could master every software. Like, for example, this is what happened now. I know so many people that was in school, not than me, who was self-taught, and they told me, I really regret that I listened to some of my teacher who said, no, really stick to Maya, really stick to 3ds Max, because this is really what you need to use in any case. And now they are rushing to learn Blender. And yeah, I think I'm saying the same thing over and over, but yeah, fundamentals is the things you have to master, because it allows you to master everything else in the end.
Yeah, for sure. It's like the ultimate source code, right? Like, once you conquer that, you can just, it's like universal. You can tap it into anything else. And even if it does take a bit of time to maybe, like, say, for example, ZBrush, it is quite a different way of doing things. But once you do get the hang of it, those fundamentals just come flooding back, and thinking, okay, this is how I, optimize maybe, a mesh, or like, this is how form works and all that kind of stuff. That's what you always fall back on. Whereas, like, let's say you're a specialist in, I don't know, like CAD modeling, for example, specifically on a specific software, but yet something else comes out tomorrow which makes it either all automated, or like, you don't need a specialist for that particular tool anymore. Then, unless you can adapt and change and switch to something else, it's going to be very tough and brutal for like many technicians or people who maybe do specialize in a certain thing. And I guess what the last few years have shown, more so, like with the tools that have just come, like, for example, Blender, even like render engines, where before you needed kind of like a lot of time to tweak them and optimize them and have expensive equipment to get the most out of them. Now, almost everything, although a lot of things still cost a fair bit or require some considerable investment, it's accessible for a wider range of people, as opposed to maybe just specialists and pros now. Is that something that like, and I guess you kind of answered it with your views on how fundamentals are key, and that's pretty much it, which is, it's proven time and time again, where, fundamentals is ultimately where it's at, and there's nothing else that would become more important than that. But is that something that like worries you? The fact that like, all of these tools that are coming out and almost making things automated in a way where, like you don't need to learn. Technically, you can get away with making a project without knowing fundamentals, right? These days.
Yeah, actually, I would like to say that I'm not afraid, but this will not be a true statement, because it's almost inevitable to be a bit scared, because we all have this really human idea that art is human and art needs our implication in that, and we are all scared that one day machines will achieve what we can do now, and this is already almost the case. But this is something we can quite easily calm down, this feeling of being scared of that, because when you think about it, this is something that we have already known all along our history. Tools never stopped improve, and we improve with it, and the quality of work we produce upgrades with the tools. And for example, I was thinking about that a few days ago. I was wondering what is the future of the kind of art that we made if some programs like I know it's not called like this anymore, but previously it was NVIDIA Gogan. Like I don't know how it's called now, but if this kind of software can allow you to not learn fundamentals and do things like this, the answer is, I think, like today, still images are the thing that you send to your clients, and this is what is used to make these things. But can we imagine that in the future, like for example, making short animation, short videos explaining, and this is, some artists already does that quite well, but all those tools will allow you to make this, and this is in fact really exciting. Can you imagine having tools like I don't know, there is some AI software that allow you to make characters from photos, so you don't have to spend any time. For example, there is already software like this, and can you imagine doing this? And this is so exciting. Like we could think about making our own mini movies as a concept art. I think this is absolutely awesome, in fact. So I think we are at a step in the history of art and technology where, yes, there is an high probability that the way we have always constructed things and making art is going to change drastically. But what the only thing we can do about that is change drastically too, and be excited by the evolution, because we know from experience that you can stop progress, and the people that are excited by the progress are the ones who succeeds in everything, because there is maybe some young people listening to the podcast, and they know how they hate, like when their parents tell them it was like this before, and no, it's not anymore, it was better, but they know it's not. And in fact, you people think that hate hearing this, if you are afraid of the tools coming, you're almost telling you the same thing that your parent does, because this is the same. You're just afraid of the same thing. This seems to change. So we have to work on ourselves to be excited and move with the tools.
And like something you mentioned that was quite interesting is, come to think of it, it's almost like it's maybe, although like art it has a special place in the hearts of many, and like someone like Da Vinci, for example, with what we would probably class as limited tools now, like his stuff is timeless, with just literally pencil and paper. That dude was a legit genius, and it's like a great testament that you don't need you just need the tools that you need, and that's it. You don't need to have like, X, Y, and Z that's advanced or what have you. But you mentioned there, like, we basically create still images for something that is likely to be made that's either moving or to be seen or experienced in 3 dimensions, either digitally or in real space. So it's almost like it's logical that tools have progressed where we almost create in a way which is like in a different dimension, almost like we're still stuck in that 2 dimension, which is still awesome. It's still beautiful. It's still great. But as in terms of like an evolution, what is the next step? Like there has to be a next step, and it's always based on like whatever the demands are and what people want, or all that kind of stuff. So it is logical that technology. I mean, like we are already using machines to create our creations. It'd be quite ironic where it becomes machines use us to create creations. That's like a sci-fi film, which I've pitched. We'll see if it's ever made. But it's interesting how like with phones in the digital era, like before like social media and YouTube, and before you had like cell phones. Before cell phones, they were all corded, and then you had like the iPhone, which completely wiped out a lot of companies that were like Nokia, for example, which were the top of the tree when it came to mobile phones. iPhone came along, completely changed the way of doing things, and now everybody, whether they were reluctant to or early adopters, operate in that particular way now in terms of communication. So in terms of like say a human perspective, that is very exciting to see. Like when we look back at history and how things used to be millennia ago to how it changed to how it is now, it's great to see how things progress. But obviously as a professional in an industry, there's always going to be that kind of anxiety, like, okay, what do I need to keep on top of now just so I can stay secure in a job and all that kind of stuff. But one other thing you mentioned as well is like the tools enable now where before you needed maybe perhaps huge productions and a lot of resources, a lot of knowledge of certain aspects of the pipeline to make these projects. Now with someone who perhaps is an amazing traditional painter or an artist of some kind, or that only specializes in one thing, but has a vision to maybe make something more grander, but then they don't have maybe perhaps the knowledge of say, animation or rendering or what have you. But then these little tools come along that can help you do that, which means that you can now fulfill your vision. Like that is something that's very exciting. And for yourself, is that something that you're maybe working towards? Because like again, looking at your work and just the way you create and the type of imagery you make, it's rewarding in the sense of like not just in terms of the technical achievement behind it, but also the story being told. And just like we mentioned before, like if I were to not know you, then it'd be a case of, it'd be interesting to see. I'd love to know what the artist's mindset was when they were making this, and etc., etc., etc. But do you have like an end goal to this? Do you want to start making projects of your own, or do you have other things in mind?
Actually, I've always said to me that my main goal would be to present myself as someone who can do everything in the productions. Like there is already some guys doing this, but they are so rare. Like you have Dylan Cole and Steven Messing, people like this. They are just so over the top. But still, we can go, I think, further like this. I think especially in games and VFX, for example, my dream would be to present myself as someone who can make, for example, an asset from start to finish. Like the asset you conceptualize is not just a sketch on paper. This is something I do a lot when I work. I present almost all my design in 3D as turntable or things like this. So at the step I'm now, this is not sufficiently good to be used as it is, but at least it can be used by, for example, a game artist to build upon. And this is my goal, to make this more and more efficient in a way. So if I can make the job of other easier, this will be a great thing. For example, but this is the goal of, I think, everybody now. For someone like Vitaly, for example, Vitaly Bulgarov, this is something like this, maybe his assets are not that optimized, they are really high poly, but he's capable of presenting something that has such a level of finish. And my dream goal would be to achieve this more optimized and, for example, moving and already being able to use that in the production. So this is one technical goal I would like to achieve, but as you said, now the tools allow us to make project on our own. So I have a lot of things that I want to do. I have a short film that I want to make when I have time. And a lot of things like this are interesting. And to come back to this notion of tools, also the tools allow us to be more creative along the way. Like you can see this in two ways. Like, can you imagine what Da Vinci would have done if he used Blender, for example?
Yes.
This is something that could be absolutely awesome. And can you imagine what you can do if you have Blender and the knowledge of Da Vinci today?
Yes.
This is things that are absolutely insane and exciting. And I'm achieving an end goal. I hope nobody has one in art, because this would be sad to have an end to our journey.
Of course, yes, that's true.
But I think this is what I want to achieve, at least making film by my own, because I've been working on my ego, but it's still present. And if I can watch myself someday in the mirror and say to me, you achieved this film alone, nobody told you anything, and you achieved this, and this is exactly what you wanted to achieve from start to finish, this will be a great step for me, for example.
Nice. Again, I love the way how you handle your ego, because it just goes to show that it's something that can be tamed but also directed in a way where it's useful to you, right? And not in a destructive way. And
right.
And maybe ego does get a bad rep, because we always hear like the negative side of things, like when someone behaves a certain way, it's because of ego. But then, for example, again, using a football example, whenever a team's losing or it's a final, and then that person with the ego and the hubris to be like, I'm going to take this on, I'm going to win this game for everybody, and they score and they win, then that's a good side to it as well. Now, learning. So all these things that we mentioned, fundamentals and new tools and making films, they all require learning. Like another thing as well, like with the tools that are changing. So yes, let's say for example, there's a magical tool tomorrow which says you can now make your film from beginning to end, or wherever you want to make. But then
it's called Blender.
Yes. Blender Unlimited comes out tomorrow, and then the whole world changes. But then, like, let's say you can make a film, then what makes a good film? Then it's things like writing and, all those other aspects, knowing how to direct and knowing pacing, cinematography. There's always something else that comes up that says, okay, fine, you've shifted your focus to this. Now you have to learn these things. And also you mentioned earlier, and this is something that I can relate to as well, where my learning or like my art really took off when I started to learn myself and take courses and like basically build my own curriculum based on my interests and what I thought was my weaknesses. And one of the cool things about yourself is, and I think nearly of all your profiles, you have obviously your name, what you do, and Learn Squared student. So I'd love to know about your Learn Squared journey and just your learning journey in general. Obviously, you did mention it earlier about how there was that like hiatus and just that journey from like school and all that kind of stuff to then learning from yourself. But yeah, what was that next chapter like?
So as I told you earlier, I've been studying in a fine art school, and this is the first time I realized that learning by yourself, especially today. Well, once again, I'm not the first one to tell that, but um, people like you on Lord Square or more individual people on Gumroad, things like this, they share such unbelievable content for such a cheap price that I don't see that much of the interest of paying like a school anymore that is so expensive, and some of them are not that good, unless you are doing art center, for example. I think it is still worth to go there because this is absolutely insane, the work they do. But the thing with learning by yourself is that when you're in school, you have a big problem, which is you have to respect the pace and the rhythm of everyone around you. Like the teacher can stop for people that don't understand, and they cannot either speed up for you if you're too advanced. So learning by myself was really good because I I know I can be quite quick to understand certain things and really slow to learn other, and so learning alone was a big thing for this because I found my rhythm on this, and I learned to spend more time on the things that I needed to 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 learn more and things like this. And Learn Square in particular is a really interesting support for learning because I wrote that down in the description of one of my previous artwork. I was amazed by something that I realized quite recently when I was watching again, because I watch again and again some courses I took on Learn Square. This is, for example, I was talking about the environment painting class by Massiage. And what is awesome with this is that the first time I watched it might be like 1 year and a half, or maybe more. I don't know, but there is still things I pick up now that I wasn't understanding when I watched it for the first time. This is really interesting because you have, with those kind of courses, you have the opportunity to watch it again and again, and the it's not like you didn't understand things that he said and you said, okay, I don't understand. I almost have the feeling that I'm watching a new course every time I'm watching it, because I have more understanding of what I do, and the smallest things, like something that I thought was detail, became the new course in itself, if I'm clear. So yeah, this is really interesting for this, and yeah, the main thing with learning, I think, is learning from good, if not awesome, people, and this is a thing that Lord Square can offer because you don't have the opportunity. The opportunity to learn with those kind of people is so rare, but this is something important to mention, that when you start learning things, I don't know if it was your case, for example, but if tomorrow I want to learn of how to craft a chair, for example, I'm going to YouTube and I'm going to type how to build a chair.
Yeah.
But this makes no sense because I don't have the keywords to make a good chair. I'm going to make the most basic chair ever.
Yes.
And the more you learn with quality people, they don't even realize it when they teach to people, but they are saying keywords that then you can use to improve your learning. This is small things that they say, but this gives you so much to expand your area of research after the course. For example, if I'm again clear with what I want to say.
Oh, no, totally, 100%. Yeah, I get that all the time. Like, it's a bit like, do you have any children?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. So like the way you just described it, like with going back and almost like watching a course again, right? It's like say if you have a child and they're just learning the alphabet, and then before there's like they're just kind of recognizing that there's a pattern, there's a sequence, they don't know how to say it, and then slowly they start putting words together.
Mhm.
Like the structure of what they are observing has not
Mhm.
changed, but their understanding is constantly improving, and then obviously
Mhm.
they're reaching higher and higher levels, right?
Yeah, right.
And like I've done that so many times. Like the first two courses I took, this is before I even worked for Learn Squared. It was just a case of it being a student. Were Jammer's courses and Mache's course, but his was the futuristic design one,
Mhm.
and I just remember like at that point in time, it was just a case of, like you said, my mindset was more of how do I make a chair, just because I wanted to show people a studio I can make a chair, and then I wanted to get hired for making a chair.
Mhm.
But then slowly, like you mentioned, like the quality of what I was absorbing and learning and everything, it was unlocking. Basically, I set the bar way too low, and I was unlocking like this whole new world of how I can create and how I should push it. And like you mentioned, when you're learning from like absolute legends who are great at teaching their knowledge, it was and still is game changing, because I always go back and I realize that, okay, I know you said this that time when I've done it, but even when I'm not taking a course, let's say I'm doing it for a client or one of my own projects, and
Mhm.
then finally it clicks of what was being mentioned, like, oh, that's what they meant, and now I understand the
Mhm.
power of this technique, and you go crazy with it. Um, but like learning. So learning is something that is also a mindset, right? Because maybe it's because of growing up and how schools are. It's almost like a boring thing, a negative thing. Like, oh, I have to
Mhm.
learn this, I have to do this. It's almost the best way is like Neo. You just want to get plugged into the matrix, and then you
Yeah.
get downloaded and learn all these awesome martial arts and kick ass. Um, but like maybe it's an older thing as you get older or more mature. Um, Especially in the creative field, like learning it's fun when done properly, and because there is so much to learn in terms of theory and fundamentals and just areas to progress in, there's enough learning for a lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, have you always been a good learner, or is that something that you discovered? Like, what I mean by that is like, are you always hungry to get knowledge?
Mhm.
Um, and if so, how do you absorb information, or does it have to be just right for it to kind of click?
Mm, I have two points to make regarding that. This is that, as I told you, because I grow in a creative family,
Mm,
they teach me, and this was a natural thing for me to look for knowledge and being curious. And I have a chance, and this has been particularly a chance or not when I was,
mhm,
for example, in high school, that I have a good memory. Like it's easy for me to listen to something and assimilate it really quickly.
nice.
So I was the worst student in high school, but because I had good memory, I could make my way
Fair enough.
without
Yeah.
fair enough. But the downside also to it is that when you have this kind of building blocks in your personality, there is something awful that happens is that people talk about talent, and talent is, to me, one of the worst things you can talk of when you
Hmm.
speak about art, because it makes people think that this is something that you have naturally. Like being
Yes.
good at art is a talent. This is something that they think that. And this is really the worst thing you can tell to an artist, because some people would think, so I'm not good at this, so I never be.
Mm,
And particularly when you have the opportunity, like I had, to be curious and be creative from an early stage, I have to change my mind when I started learning by my own, because I discovered that what I knew from my childhood and my curiosity wasn't sufficient enough to be good. What I thought to be good as an high school artist, is absolutely nothing compared to what professional artists does. And
Yes.
when I discovered that, this was the best thing I could ever understand, because I discovered that you need to overpass this feeling of being just curious and creative will make the deal. You and in this way, uh, meeting my big ego, um, I became a really hard worker.
Mm.
I now I have to admit that I'm almost a workaholic. I work always. Like, this is really annoying to my wife, because whenever she turns her back, I'm on the PC trying a little stuff or something. But yeah, this is something really important to know, that those kind of skills doesn't come by themselves. You need to
Oh, of
work
course, yes.
really hard to achieve that.
That's awesome, man. And I think that's also a great note to wrap up the podcast on. But before we do, like what next can we expect from you in terms of, obviously there's a lot of NDA stuff that's happening, which
Mhm.
is going to be exciting when the NDA is no longer existent.
Mhm.
But like what else do you have planned? And are you someone who does like kind of plans the year ahead in terms of like what you want to achieve or things you want to get at, or is it just like we'll just walk the path and then see whatever comes up?
Um, Actually, I have some project, like, this is almost sadly, this is really related to social network, because in my experience from now, I really need visibility
Mm-hmm.
to get some clients work. So I want to continue to post experiments and post my work to reach a lot more people, if possible, to have feedback and get more clients. This would be great. Also, people showed me some interest on what I'm going to work on this NGA project that I show a little bit on my Instagram. And there is, I just opened my Patreon, so I want to, as we
Cool.
told before, I'm going to start sharing a little bit of my process, thing like this. Also, I can mention that I have this short movie project that is coming as soon as I will have time to do this. And basically, I'm really, as you said before, I'm really hungry for knowledge. And my goal, if there is one, is to continue learning. And I know I will be never satisfied, but I'll try to get the closest to satisfaction I can with art. This is the big projects of, I guess, everyone, but yeah, this is what I want now.
Oh yeah, I think that absolutely nails it. It's like the closest to satisfaction, or the closest to that feeling of, like, hey, this is that fulfillment of being a creative. But we all really know that it's never gonna get fulfilled. But
Yeah,
we never stop, right? Um,
exactly.
dude, it was awesome chatting to you. So many great insights that you came up with today. So yeah, that's gonna be super. I'm sure the listeners are gonna be so crazy over that. It's gonna be super awesome. But before we end the podcast, like, any final words from yourself? Obviously, just mention things that we can look forward to, and we'll definitely put up your links in our show notes and descriptions and everything. But is there anything final you want to say?
I have to be careful with what I say. This is the last. This is the last word. But I would like to say something inspiring if I can achieve something like this. But, like, being an artist has been my dream since I'm a child, and this has been really hard sometimes. This has been really more fun sometimes. But I know along the way, recently, I heard a lot of people and influencers, like something like this, telling people to really this is a cool thing, to accept yourself as you are. But there is this, I think, bad mentality about this. The downside to this is that people tend to encourage people to have lower goals and be too much patience with yourself. And what I want to say with this is that if you need to believe that hard work will get you where you need. Yes, hard work doesn't guarantee you will succeed, but successful people are all hard worker. So if I can say something to the end, yes, please do your best to work hard and to. This is so naive, but yeah, try to achieve your dreams. And the only shortcut to it is working hard and learn. And yeah, Learn Square is a good place to be an hard worker.
Well said. Well said. Thanks, Théo.
Thank you. Thank you.
A massive thanks to Théo for being my guest on the Learn Squared podcast. It was great chatting with him, and I hope you enjoyed listening too. Hit the links below to check out what Théo's been up to and give him a follow. Also, embark on your own Learn Squared journey, like Théo, by taking our courses. All of our first lessons are free, which means there's well in excess of 60 hours worth of free training from the industry's leading artists, designers and creatives. And of course, if you haven't already, please like, share and subscribe. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Until next time.